We have shared with you several DIY projects for Halloween, and I'm going to start the month of October with another Halloween craft. It's this friendly ghost plushie and it even has a cute bow on its head. Now you can add this for your Halloween decor collection, and let's start with materials and tools. Starting with essentials, you'll need pins or clips, a hand needle, a pair of scissors, a fabric marking pen, matching embroidery floss, fiber fill for stuffing, and a long rod with a blunt end for use in stuffing and poking narrow corners. Then of course you'll need to download and print the free PDF pattern we have provided in the description. Now let's move on to the fabrics. For the fabric bow, I have selected a cotton fabric with candy corn print. You'll need 2 pieces each measuring 4 by 3 inches in size. Then for the ghost eyes and mouth, I'm using thicker felt fabric in black color. Since felt fabric doesn't fray, I think this will be a good choice. Now for the body of the ghost, you can select any fabric you prefer. I got this fabric from my old sweater and it's 100% polyester. Since I'm using this as a Halloween decor for my personal use, I'm glad I could reuse my old clothing for this project. And I really like its soft texture too. First, let's start by cutting out the pattern pieces, and you will find the link for these down in the description. There are only 2 pattern pieces in this project, one for the body and one for the mouth and eyes. Cut along the straight lines, and the shapes in the dashed lines are only there to guide you where things go when sewing. Now use those 2 template pieces to cut the required number of fabric pieces you need. I'm starting with the template piece for eyes and mouth. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using felt for this, and you'll need 3 from that. Since this is a small template piece, you can just hold it to the felt fabric and then carefully cut around it. You can also use a fabric marking pen for this as well. If you want to learn more about how to cut felt pieces, make sure to check out the tutorial on that. I'll leave the link in the description. After that, let's move to cut the 2 body pieces for the ghost from our main fabric. The easiest way is to keep 2 fabric layers facing the right sides together first. Since I got my fabric from the hoodie part of my old sweater, I have 2 separate pieces. But if you are using a single layer of fabric, just fold it into 2 layers to face the right sides together. Then place your template piece on top of the wrong side of the fabric and carefully outline it using a fabric marking pen while holding it in place. You can also pin and place the template piece to both layers first and then simply cut around it if you prefer it that way. After you have outlined the pattern, remove the template and now pin the 2 layers together to keep both layers intact. Now when you are pinning, make sure to keep your pins inside of the drawn pattern. When you have enough pins, start to cut around the drawn pattern. This way you can easily get the required 2 body pieces in one go, and even if you made a small mistake when cutting, it'll be no harm since both pieces are identical. So rather than cutting 2 body pieces separately, I recommend you to cut both pieces in one go. Finally, remove the pins, and now you have all the fabric pieces to start your project. 2 pieces for the body, 3 pieces for the eyes and mouth, and 2 pieces for the fabric bow. Now let's start with sewing the eyes and mouth first. Take one of the body pieces and place the felt pieces for the mouth and eyes where it belongs. You can use the template piece for the body as a guide to see where those go. Then thread your needle with a matching embroidery thread color and make a knot at the end. One by one, hand sew those pieces to the body using either back stitch or whip stitch. I'm using the simple back stitch here, and I'll leave the links for those tutorials in case you want to check those out. I mean, yes, you can even machine sew these parts as well, but for me it's much easier this way. So pick any method you are more comfortable with to attach these to the body. When making plushies, another common way to sew eyes and mouth is hand embroidery. Since I wanted larger eyes and mouth, I thought this way is much easier. But if you prefer hand embroidery instead of using felt, there are several ways to do that, and don't forget to check out our tutorials on that particular topic as well. Once you hand sew all 3 pieces, turn over to the back of the fabric and make a couple of knots to secure the stitch. Finally, trim the thread, and this is how the face of the ghost looks at the end. Now, if you want to go one step further, you can even embroider a small circle with white color embroidery floss at the bottom part of the eyes. But I'm thinking of keeping things simple, so I'm not going to do that. Just an idea if you want to add a little something more. Now it's time to assemble the ghost. Place one piece of the body on top of the other, facing the right sides together. Make sure they are aligning with each other and start to pin 2 layers together. Instead of using a few pins, use a lot of pins around the margin. This simple trick will really help you to keep the shape and will make things much easier while sewing. This is something I learned through experience, and it makes a huge difference. Next step is to sew all the way around. But before doing that, we need to leave a small space to turn the right side out. I'm going to mark 2 to 3 inches of space, and starting from one marked point, sew all the way around until you reach the other marked point. Because of the fabric I used, this has become a little bulkier than I expected. So instead of using my regular footer, I'm going to use the zipper footer for this part of the project. It allows me to sew bulky seams much smoother. I need to remind you that I only have a basic sewing machine, and I change things here and there to accommodate that. This may vary depending on what kind of sewing machine you got. Coming back to the project, do a little back stitch at the beginning and leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Since we have used a lot of pins, make sure to remove the pins as you go, and don't let your needle get damaged by going over a pin. Another thing is that this ghost shape has lot of curves, and you need to move the fabric in a circular motion while going through those areas. Other than that, you can simply sew straight until you reach the other marked point. Once you reach the other marked point, do a little back stitch to secure the stitch. Finally, trim all threads, and now it's time to turn the right side out using the space we left. But before doing that, there is another important step you need to follow to keep this ghost shape smooth as possible. Take your fabric cutting scissors and make small cuts along the seams without damaging any of the stitches. Be extra careful because you don't need any holes in your final product. Making small cuts along the curvy seams reduce its tension, and this will help to keep the shape once it's turned right side out. So don't miss this important step even if you are in a hurry. After that, you can simply turn the right side out using the space we left. Try to poke out all the corners as much as you can, and you can even use a rod with a blunt end to poke out far corners. It's already looking cute and I'm really satisfied with how it turned out. The next step is stuffing the ghost using a small fiber fill at a time. I have made a lot of small felt plushies on this channel, but this one may require more fiber fill than those small projects. So make sure you have enough. Once again, you can use that same rod to push the fiber fill to far corners. When you think you have stuffed enough, now it's time to enclose the opening we left. For that, I'm going to use the ladder stitch. It's an invisible stitch commonly used in plushie making. First, hand press the seam edges towards the inside before starting anything. This part is also hand stitching. So thread your needle with a matching embroidery thread color and make a knot at the end. I have double threaded my needle and I'm using black embroidery thread color just so you can see things clearly. Now starting from one of the ends, insert the needle through one side of the seam so you can hide away the knot nicely. Pull the needle all the way. Then move your needle to the directly opposite point on the other side of the seam edge. From there, insert the needle through the fabric and at the same time, move the needle up and a little further through the fabric and pull it from there to make your first stitch. Again, move your needle to the directly opposite point on the other side of the seam edge. From that point, insert the needle through the fabric and then move it up and a little further through the fabric to make your second stitch. After this point, it will be the same steps again and again, and once you make 3 to 4 stitches, make sure to pull the needle all the way and you'll see how nicely it encloses without leaving any trace. Follow the same steps until you cover the entire unsewn area. I'll do a separate detailed tutorial on the ladder stitch later, and I hope you got an idea just to cover this part of the project. Once you enclose the entire area with the ladder stitch, make a couple of knots to secure the stitch. Then insert the needle through that point and come up at any random place a little far from the entry point. Finally, pull the thread towards you and trim it. As you can see, even with the black embroidery thread color, you can hardly see the stitches in that area. Now we are at the final step of our project and it's time to make a cute bow for our ghost friend. As I showed you in the beginning, I have cut 2 fabric pieces in Halloween print and now place them facing the right sides together. Make sure they are aligned as well. You can use a couple of pins to hold the 2 layers in place. Next, we are going to sew this around. But before that, Leave about 2 inches of space at one of the wider sides to turn the right side out later. Now starting at one of the marked points, sew all the way around until you reach the other marked point. Even here, do a little back stitch at the beginning and leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sew straight, and when you reach a corner, stop the sewing while the needle is down. Then raise the foot and pivot. Lower the foot and you can start to sew again. Do a little back stitch and stop the sewing once you reach the other marked point. Finally, trim all threads, and before turning the right side out, trim all 4 corners and bulky parts out. This will make things much smoother once turned right side out. So make sure you won't skip these small steps. Now let's turn the right side out using the small opening we left. If you rush things out, that may damage the stitches at the opening edges. So take your time and keep things slow. To poke out the far corners, you can use something like this wooden rod I'm using here. At this point, hand press the entire thing, and especially around the unsewn seam ends. After that, we are going to top stitch around this rectangular shape, and that will enclose the opening we left. Do a little back stitch at the beginning and at the ending. Also, make sure to leave less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Otherwise, you may not enclose the opening properly. Attaching a fabric bow to this ghost is totally optional. If you're not interested in that, you can completely ignore these steps. The basic part of the bow is completed, and we can now attach it to the ghost. For that, thread your needle with a matching embroidery thread color, and I'm using all 6 strands. In here, we are not going to make a knot at the other end of the thread. Now take the rectangular fabric piece and gather it at the middle to make it into a fabric bow. As you can understand, it has to be at the wider side. To keep this shape as it is, we are going to tie it at the middle using the free end of the embroidery thread I showed you earlier. Make 2 to 3 strong knots and you will get a beautiful bow out of a simple rectangle just like that. Now, leaving the longer thread end connected to the needle as it is, trim the other end of the thread short. Adjust the bow for your liking, and our next and the final step is to attach this bow to the ghost. Pick any place you want the bow to be. It could be the side of the head or even just below the mouth to keep as a bow tie. I'm going for the side of the head. Place the side of the bow with the trim thread facing the body, so that part won't be visible to the outside. Now move the thread forward and insert the needle at the lower area of the bow through the front layer of the body. Then move the needle up and come through the front layer of the body just above the bow. Pull the needle all the way, and this will hold the bow in place. Now repeat the same steps by making another 3 to 4 stitches to keep the bow steady and strong. Once you feel like it's steady enough, make a couple of knots to secure the stitch. Then insert the needle through the plushie and come through any random place to hide away the remaining thread. Finally, pull the thread towards you and trim it. This is how our cute ghost friend looks at the end, and it might need to freshen up after going through all these steps. Let me know what you think of this project, and please subscribe if you think more people need to see this cute ghost. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll join you in the next one.